Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to The Way. We're so glad you're joining us this morning as we continue into our David series. Ryan Kurofsky, he is our youth leader, our high school youth leader. He's going to deliver the message today, so we are so excited. So if you are a youth, yes, you can heckle him. He will feel right at home. Otherwise, I hope you were given a bulletin this morning because there is a whole list of things going on, all of our regular events, our once a month, our bi-weekly events, our every week. So get plugged in, prayerfully consider where God is calling you. If you have any questions about our discipleship, call the office and ask for Marcy. She's never too busy to talk to you, and we would love to get you plugged in. There's just two things specifically I want to talk to you about. There is a survey QR code in the bulletin, and we would love for you to take that survey. Many of you have, but if you would, please take that survey if you've been a part of the Way for a while, or maybe you just joined and you've taken a class. We would love your feedback in that survey. The second thing is, a few people have asked, yes, the Way store is still open. There's still things that you can buy. There's pullovers. There's people here wearing the We the People shirts. They come from that store. There's new Bible bags. There's a whole bunch of things on there. So you can go to our website. You can go to our app and see all of the things that are on sale. Otherwise, that's really all I have for you this morning. We're going to go into a wonderful time of worship. I know you've been greeting, but why don't you stand up and say good morning to a few people around you, and we will begin our worship.
Tells the sun to rise every morning, colors the sky with shades of His glory, wakes us with mercy and love. Jesus does. Who holds the orphan and comforts the widow, cries for injustice and feels every sorrow, carries the pain of His children. Jesus does.
So we sing
praise to the Father who gave us the Son, praise to the Spirit, He's living in us. When I was a sinner, He saved me from who I was. That's what Jesus does. Who understands the heart of the sinner, showers His grace over all our mistakes, washes us clean with His blood. Jesus does. Yes, He does. Who sings a song of sweet forgiveness, who stole the keys to hell and the grave, who has power to save. Jesus does. So we sing praise to the Father who gave us the Son, praise to the Spirit, He's living in us. When I was a sinner, He saved me from who I was. That's what Jesus does. Oh, what a friend, oh, what a Savior, He's always came to my rescue when I needed him most, and he saved my soul.
So we sing praise to the Father who gave us the Son. Praise to the Spirit who's living in us. When I was a sinner, he saved me from who I was. So we sing praise to the Father who gave us the Son. Praise to the Spirit who's living in us. When I was a sinner, he saved me from who I was. God, I know that's what Jesus does. Whoa, that's what Jesus does.
If you're troubled, heavy-hearted, come to Jesus and find your peace. And if you're run down, empty-handed, come to Jesus and find your strength. He is hope for the hopeless, rest for the weary, help for the hurting. He is mending the broken, bearing the burdens, all that you're needing. He is. If you're wandering in the darkness, come to Jesus and find your way. If you want freedom, need forgiveness, come to Jesus and find his grace. He is hope for the hopeless, rest for the weary, help for the hurting. He is mending the broken, bearing the burdens, all that you're needing. He is Comforter, Counselor, Prince of Peace, Author and Maker of everything, Defender, Deliverer, King of Kings. He is Helper and Healer forevermore, Savior and Shelter through every storm, my refuge, Redeemer and Lord of Lords. He is Child of Heaven and Son of Man, Provider, Protector, the great I am, Alpha, Omega, beginning and end. He is help for the hopeless, rest for the weary, help for the hurting. He is mending the broken, bearing the burdens, all that you're needing. He is all that you're needing. He is.
Will you pray with me? Lord, it is so awesome to serve a God that cares about us so much. That is all that we need. I love those words. All that you're needing, He is. Whatever struggles we're going through, you are all that we need. That is so comforting. Jesus is just another reason why we worship you. For being a God that loves us that much. Lord, we just say thank you. And as we give back for all that you provide us, we give back out of that love that we have for you. Lord, we know you don't need it, but use it. Use it to further your kingdom. Use it to find those who don't know you yet, so that you can be all that they need. In your name I pray. Amen. You may be seated.
If it's bandaging the broken, washing filthy feet, here I am, Lord, send me. If it's loving one another, even when we don't agree, here I am, Lord, send me.
If I'm poor, if I'm wealthy, I'll serve you just the same. Here I am, Lord, send me. On the mountain or the valley, I will choose to praise. Here I am, Lord, send me. If I'm known by how I love, let my life reflect how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh, my answer will be yes, 'cause I love you. I love you. If the truth cuts like an arrow, I will say it anyway. 'Cause here I am, Lord, send me. And if it means that they'll reject me, Lord, I will still obey. Here I am, Lord, send me. If I'm known by how I love, let my life reflect how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh, my answer will be yes, 'cause I love you. I love you. When I'm standing in your glory, I'll be glad I chose to say, here I am, Lord, send me. Well done, good and faithful, I live to hear you say, here I am, Lord, send me. Here I am, Lord, my life reflect how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh, my answer will be yes, 'cause I love you. I love you. If I'm known by how I love, let my life reflect how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh, my answer will be yes, 'cause I love you. I love Here I am, Lord, send me. 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 If I'm known by how I love, let my life reflect how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh, my answer will be yes, 'cause I love you. I love you. If I'm known by how I love, let my life reflect how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh, my answer will be yes, 'cause I love you. I love you.
So this morning we're going to continue with that idea of looking at King David and how he came to be and looking at his heart. Because the Bible says that he was a man after God's own heart. And so we want to kind of figure out what that means and how we apply that to us, right? So I have the simple task this morning of we're going to work through 1 Samuel 18 through 31. 13 chapters. Thank you. Yeah, perfect timing on this though. It'll be fun. So I'll probably do some really poor summaries of some of these chapters as we work our way through it. But we're going to kind of pull out some of the stuff that looks at this key theme of waiting and suffering. Okay, waiting and suffering. David, this is his wilderness experience. There's multiple examples in the Bible. There's Abraham had a wilderness experience. Moses had a wilderness experience. Jesus even had a wilderness experience. Jesus didn't need any like character development or anything like that, but it was part of him showing us to be he was the perfect example. He was showing us how to have a wilderness experience, right? So David has his here, and so just a forewarning, not we, but oftentimes as Americans and just as people, we like feel-good stories. We look to the good. When we read stories like the story of Noah, we talk about the flood and like you see the happy boat and all the happy animals in it in the kids' pictures, but you don't talk about the dead bodies floating in the water. So this is kind of a similar story as far as it is not a super kid-friendly story. It is not politically correct, so just a forewarning, if you got kids in here, it might be an interesting ride home. Okay, so chapter 17 ends with David killing Goliath, right? And so he goes out, kills Goliath, comes back, and he's talking with Saul, and that's where we're going to pick up in chapter 18. Chapter 18 says, after David had finished talking with Saul, he met with Jonathan, the king's son. There was an immediate bond between them, for Jonathan loved David. And from that day, Saul kept David with him and wouldn't let him return home. So David just killed Goliath, and he comes and he starts to serve Saul. He's got this servant heart. Even though he knows he's been anointed as king, he's going to come under service of Saul, right? And he meets Jonathan, and that's the king's son. He is the next heir to the throne. And he meets Jonathan. They have an immediate bond. They become good friends, and they remain friends throughout all of this stuff that David goes through and all the stuff that Jonathan goes through. Verse 3, it says, and Jonathan made a solemn pact with David because he loved him as he loved himself. Jonathan sealed the pact by taking off his robe and giving it to David together with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. In that day, kings and princes and queens and stuff, they would wear robes, and it signified their royalty. So by him taking that off and giving it to David, it was a token of appreciation. It was saying, here's my royalty. I'm basically putting it on you. So it was this bond, this pact that they were making with each other. So then in verse 5, it says, whatever Saul asked David to do, David did it successfully. So Saul made him a commander over the men of war, an appointment that was welcomed by the people and Saul's officers alike. When the victorious Israelite army was returning home after David had killed the Philistine, women all over the towns of Israel came out to meet King Saul. They sang and they danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals. This was their song. Saul has killed his thousands, and David has killed his 10,000s. Saul has killed his thousands, David has killed his 10,000. So they're celebrating. They're excited for the success that David's having. And you would think, Saul having David under his service, that would be his response too. He would say, look at my servant David, like look how successful he is. He's doing awesome. He's doing all these things for Israel. You'd think he'd be excited and pumping him up and like telling everybody, come look at David and all he's accomplished. No, that's not Saul's response. In verse 8 he says, this made Saul very angry. What's this, he said? They credit David with 10,000s and me only thousands. Next they'll be making him their king. So from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. A jealous eye. Not just watching him or not just watching him with a close eye or anything, a jealous eye, right? Jealousy is dangerous. Actually in James 3:15 through 16 says, for jealousy and selfishness are not God's kind of wisdom. Such things are earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. Saul has jealousy in his heart, and so he's watching David with a jealous eye. He's looking for all the ways that David is better, or that Saul doesn't measure up, or all the things that David does wrong or does right, whatever. He's watching him really closely to find error in him, right? So then the very next day, because this jealousy is opening him up to demonic, the very next day a tormenting spirit from God overwhelmed Saul, and he began to rave in his house like a madman. David was playing a harp as he did each day, but Saul had a spear in his hand, and he suddenly hurled it at David, intending to pin him to the wall, and David escaped him twice. So 2 times, Saul tries to kill him. And so when it says that God sent this tormenting spirit, this is not the first time that God's going to do that. It's not that God is sending this spirit that then makes Saul murderous and want to hurt David. All God's doing basically is putting Saul under stress and exposing what's in his heart. Okay, it's no secret that stress exposes what's going on inside, right? The military uses this, when we get in fights, when we get in anger, when we get stressed at our jobs, the things that bubble up out of us, the anger and frustration, all those things, how we treat people around us, that all flows out of our heart. And so God's just allowing Saul to show his cards, basically, by sending this spirit, allowing him to get angry, and he tries to kill David. That should have been the first red flag to David, like maybe this isn't for me, that this guy's already tried to kill me twice. But it doesn't really persuade him or push him away. David comes back and he keeps serving. But it goes on in verse 12. It says, Saul was then afraid of David, for the Lord was with David and had turned away from Saul. So it's starting to finally dawn on Saul. He knows he's been rejected by God. He knows that God is going to anoint another king, but he doesn't know who. David's the only one, I guess, in his family know that David's been picked and anointed, but Saul doesn't know it. So Saul's looking for anybody who's a threat. Okay, and he's starting to pick up that like, oh man, like David's getting some fame. He's having some success. It seems like God is with him. He saved him from my spear twice. And so Saul's going to start, that jealousy's really going to start to pick up. Finally, Saul sent him away and appointed him to the commander over 1,000 men, and David faithfully led his troops into battle. So David's still serving after he's already been tried to be murdered. David continued his success in everything he did, for the Lord was with him. When Saul recognized this, he became even more afraid. But all of Israel and Judah loved David because he was so successful in leading his troops into battle. So David's racking up the successes here. It goes on in 17, it says that one day Saul said to David, I'm ready to give you my older daughter, Merab, as your wife. But first you must prove yourself to Israel, or to be a real warrior, by fighting the Lord's battle. Because he clearly hasn't done that already by winning battles, killing Goliath, and being successful. So Saul says, I'll send him out against the Philistines and let them kill him rather than doing it myself. Saul can't do it himself because David's like gaining fame. People like him. He's likable. He's doing well. He's a commander, all this stuff. So Saul knows I can't just kill him off myself. So instead, as was a custom in that day, is they would just put that guy in the front of the line and send him out hoping that they would get killed by the enemy. Okay, so he's vindictive and he's hoping David gets killed here, and he promises him basically into his family. He says, I'll let you marry my first daughter and you'll become part of my family, but you got to go and do this first. He's hoping that he gets killed. Verse 18, it says, this is David's response to that. It says, who am I and what is my family in Israel that I should be the king's son-in-law? David exclaimed, my father and my family are nothing. David's response to this promise of Saul's first daughter is excitement and joy and humility. He's like, who am I? I'm just a shepherd boy, and now I'm here serving the king, and I get to be part of the king's family. Like, he is honored by this, which humility is not something Saul loves. And so it says David actually goes out, he fights these battles, and then comes back, and he's successful. And it says, so in 19, so when the time came for Saul to give his daughter to Merab in marriage to David, he gave her instead to Adriel, a man from Mahola. Gives him away, promises him that he's going to have his daughter, has marriage. David goes out, fights the battles, meets the requirement, comes back, and he's like, oh yeah, sorry, I gave her to another man. It's rude. In the meantime, Saul's daughter, Michal, had fallen in love with David. So Saul's other daughter falls in love with David, and Saul is delighted when he heard about it. You think he's delighted because David's a good man and he's a successful warrior? Wrong again. He says, here's another chance to see him killed by the Philistines. That's what Saul says to himself. He is delighted at another opportunity to kill David, one of his most trusted warriors. Delighted. Saul says to David, today you're going to have a second chance to become my son-in-law. Like, what an honor. I've already tried to kill you multiple times and taken the first wife away from you, but you can be my son-in-law. What a blessing. Then Saul told his men to tell David, the king really likes you. So he's scheming with his men. He says, the king really likes you. And so do we. So why don't you accept the king's offer and become his son-in-law? When Saul's men told these things to David, he replied, how can a poor man from a humble family afford the bride price for the daughter of a king? When Saul's men reported this back to the king, he told them, tell David that all I want for the bride price is 100 Philistine foreskins. Vengeance on my enemies is all I really want. But what Saul had in mind is that David would be killed in the fight. So Saul's men go and tell David, you should marry the second daughter. Take this man. And David's like, I can't afford it. A bride price in that day, it's kind of a show of faith. It's a way of saying like, here, I'm going to bless that family. I have the finances to bless your family, and I'm going to have the finances to care for your daughter, right? He wasn't like buying the daughter. That'd be weird. But it's a way to bless the family with this bride price. He doesn't have any money because he comes from a humble family. And so Saul says, Don't worry about the bride price. That's fine. All I want is vengeance on my enemies. I want 100 foreskins. If you guys don't know what a foreskin is, can you guys pull that picture up? I'm kidding. If you don't know what a foreskin is, Google it at your own risk. But there was only one way for David to go and get 100 foreskins. It was to go and kill 100 Philistines. And the goal this is 100 opportunities that that David could be killed in battle. Okay, so he's still scheming. How's David respond? Verse 26. David was delighted to accept the offer. He's happy that he's like, you know what? I can do that. I can go out and kill 100 Philistines, no problem. And before the time limit expired, he and his men went out and killed 200 Philistines. So he doubles the original request, which is, a lot. So anyways, then David fulfilled the king's requirements by presenting all their foreskins to him, which is a weird thing to picture. So Saul gave his daughter Michal to David as his wife. So Saul finally relents, gives his daughter to David to be her wife, or be his wife. Okay, then it goes on. It says that in verse 28, when Saul realized that the Lord was with him, or with David, and how much his daughter Michal loved him, Saul became even more afraid of him, and remained David's enemy for the rest of his life. That jealousy had taken seat in his heart, in Saul's heart, and he held on to it. He held on to that grudge. He held on to that fear. Even his daughter's love for David made him fearful. And then in verse 30, it says, every time his commanders, the commanders of the Philistines attacked, David was more successful against them than all the rest of Saul's officers, and David's name became very famous. So David's just still racking up the victories here. Okay, so then going on in chapter 19, jump to verse 1. Saul, not deterred by any of this, his scheme's not working yet. He urged his servants and his son Jonathan to assassinate David. So he turns to his son, who is David's best friend. He says, now I want you to kill him. And all of David's co-workers, as his servants, to assassinate him. Okay, so Jonathan is him and David already have this covenant. It's not going to happen. He's going to go to bat for David. I'm going to skip some verses here, but long story short, Jonathan goes to Saul, says, let's not kill him. He's good. Why are you trying to do that? All that stuff. He goes to bat for him. And so in verse 6, it says, so Saul listened to Jonathan and vowed, as surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed. Okay, so he agrees once again with Jonathan and vows that he's not going to kill David. Okay, then he brings him into his house. In verse 7, it says, afterward, Jonathan called David and told him what had happened. And they brought David to Saul, and David began to serve in the court as before. Undeterred by all these murder attempts already, David comes back, serves Saul again, and then in verse 9, but one day when Saul was sitting at home with his spear in his hand, the tormenting spirit from the Lord suddenly came upon him, more stress, and as David plays his harp, Saul hurled his spear at David. But David dodged out of the way and left the spear behind, stuck in the wall as he fled and escaped into the night. Okay, so Saul does the same thing. Tries to kill him with a spear. And at this point, David goes on the run. Okay, he runs back home to his wife. We're going to skip kind of through the next. I'll summarize some of this, but he runs back home to his wife. Saul sends after a couple assassins. They go and they stand outside of his house. They're going to kill him in the middle of the night. So they wait for him to go to bed. And the daughter, Michal, she knows what's happening. She understands that there's going to be these assassins coming. She finds out about it, and so she tells David he needs to flee. He flees in the middle of the night out of a window, and then right out of a movie or a story, she puts a doll's head with goat hair on it in the bed, and then pillows, to make it look like he's laying in bed, and to fool him that he's still in bed when he's off on the run. And then verse 15, Saul sends his troops to go get David, and says, "Bring him to me in his bed so I can kill him." But when they came to carry David out, they discovered that it was only an idol, like a statue in the bed with a cushion of goat's hair at its head. And Saul's response to his daughter is, "Why have you betrayed me like this and let my enemy escape?" Saul demanded of Michal. So Saul's mad at his daughter for protecting her husband. What is clear here is that Saul doesn't understand marriage. At that point, if she is married to Saul, or if Michal is married to David, her alliance is to him. Him first, is to David first, right? The Bible tells us that all the way back in Genesis is that when a man should leave his mother and his father and be married to his wife, and the two become one flesh, right? They actually are leaving the parents and they're becoming one. And so her alliance and allegiance and her honor is to David first. And Saul does not care. All he cares about, again, is himself. He cares that he thinks she's betrayed him. So David gets away. He escapes and he goes and sees Samuel in the town. And Saul sends some troops after him, and he's unsuccessful in catching him. Let's jump to chapter 20. Verse 1, David fled from Naioth in Ramah and found Jonathan. So he goes and meets up with Jonathan. What have I done? He exclaimed. What is my crime? How have I offended your father that he's so determined to kill me? That's not true, Jonathan protested. You're not going to die. He always tells me everything he's going to do, even the little things. I know my father wouldn't hide something like this from me. And so David is convinced that his father's trying to kill him, and Jonathan isn't seeing it that way. He somehow has like rose-colored glasses on and still sees his dad in a good light. He's not buying it. Or he thinks like, Saul will tell me, my dad will tell me, I know him. He'll tell me like what he's up to, and so I'll protect you. And through the next 20 some verses, they come up with a plan on how they're going to figure out Saul's intention. They don't agree of Saul's intention, and so Jonathan says, yes, I'll help you, David. We'll figure out what King Saul's intentions are. And so they come up with this plan with like shooting arrows and all this stuff. But anyways, long story short, Jonathan finds out the hard way that his dad is not who he says he is, and his dad's got stuff going on in his heart. Go to verse 28. So they're sitting at dinner right before that. They're sitting at this dinner of this festival, and Saul notices that David's not there anymore, and he gets angry about it, and he asks, like, where's David at? And Jonathan says, David earnestly asked me if he could go to Bethlehem. He said, please let me go, for we're having a family sacrifice. My brother demanded that I be there, so please let me get away to see my brothers. That's why he isn't at the king's table. So Jonathan says, David's not here. He's off with his brothers. I sent him. It's fine. Here's Saul's response. Saul boiled with rage at Jonathan. You stupid son of a whore, he swore at him. Do you think I don't know what you want? Or do you think I don't know that you want him to be king in your place, shaming your family and your mother? As long as that son of Jesse's alive, you're never going to be king. Now go to him so I can kill him. But why should he be put to death? Jonathan asked. What has he done? Then Saul hurls a spear at Jonathan, intending to kill him. So at last, Jonathan realized his father was really determined to kill David. Jonathan left the table in fierce anger and refused to eat on the second day of the festival, for he was crushed by his father's shameful behavior towards David. And so I know my family can be pretty dysfunctional at times, but never have I been at dinner and been called a name like that and had a spear thrown at me and was somebody intending to kill me. Like, that's pretty wild. And what's also interesting and funny, not funny to me, is that so Saul is mad at Jonathan, and he's saying that you, Jonathan, will never become king as long as David is alive, because he is the biggest threat to your throne, as he hurls a spear at him, trying to kill him. Like, if that's not irony, I don't know what is. This is a great example of trying to get the speck out of somebody else's eye without removing the log in yours first. Saul's got a log in his eye. He thinks that David is this big threat, and it's actually, he's the biggest threat to Jonathan being king. So at this point, David and Jonathan both know that Saul intends to kill him, that David is absolutely not safe here anymore. And so they meet up in the rest of the chapter. They meet up together with their plan. Jonathan tells David what happened, and they both realize that he is no longer safe, that David cannot stay there, that he has to run. And so they have a really heartfelt, emotional goodbye, because they know that this might be one of the last times they're together, because David is not safe there. So he goes on the run and he flees. He's forced to flee. So then in chapter 21, verse 1 through 3, it says, David went to the town of Nob to see Ahimelech, the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he saw him. Why are you alone? He asked. Why is no one with you? The king has sent me on a private matter, David said. So he's like, it's all good. He told me not to tell anyone why I'm here. Keep it hush hush. I've told my men where to meet me later. Now, what is there to eat? He sounds like every teenager I've ever met. Now, what is there to eat? Give me 5 loaves of bread or anything else you have. Still, exactly like all the teenagers. We don't have any regular bread, the priest replied, but there is holy bread which you can have if your young men have not slept with any women recently. He's trying to bend the rules a little bit. Don't worry, David replied. I never allow my men to be with women when we're on a campaign, and since they stay clean on even ordinary trips, how much more on this secret mission we're on? Since there was no food available, the priest gave him the holy bread, the bread of the presence that was placed before the Lord in the tabernacle. It had just been replaced that day with fresh bread. So here David is on the run. He's got none of his men with him. Ahimelech is one of Saul's priests. He would have recognized David. He would have known exactly who David was, and he's probably prayed for him a bunch of times before that and like taken care of him. And so David goes in. He says, I don't have any of my men here. It's a secret mission that Saul sent me on. And so David's lying here. David is trying to, he's flat out lying that he's still working for Saul and all that. And so the priest, he's kind of a little bit, I guess, scared for David, but he sees that David's in need, right? He sees that he's hungry. And so the priest kind of bends the rules a little bit, if not flat out breaks them. In Leviticus 24:9 is where this law is about the bread and everything. And so the priest is kind of bending the rules or breaking the rules in order to feed David. In the eyes of the Pharisee, in this day, this would have been a big deal. It would have been a big problem. But Jesus actually affirms in this, later or I guess like centuries later, in Luke 6, 3-5, Jesus is with the disciples. They go out, they're eating some grains, and some Pharisees get mad at him, and they're like, why are you doing that on the Sabbath? Don't you know you can't do that on the Sabbath? And Jesus replies with this story about David and says that Ahimelech was upholding the law by actually loving David rather than upholding some ceremony or ritual law, right? So the ceremonies and the rituals and the stuff in the Old Testament, they are all important. They all point to Jesus. They all have a purpose. So it's not like you can just like negate everything. But here, Ahimelech the priest saw that David was in need and cared more about the man in front of him than about upholding some ritualistic law, and Jesus affirms that was the right call. So David takes the bread. He also, because he had to flee, he doesn't have any armor, any weapons or anything like that. And so he says, do you guys have any weapons here? And Ahimelech says, we've got the sword from Goliath. So David takes that. He leaves with a full belly. He's got some food, got a weapon. He's good to go. So he goes back out on the run. But in verse 7, it says, now Doeg, the Edomite, Saul's chief herdsman, was there that day, having been detained before the Lord. And so Doeg, this Saul, this guy who serves and works for Saul, he's there. He overhears all this. He sees what happens, and it's going to come back to bite him. Okay, so David goes back on the run. He flees, he goes to Gath. In the rest of 21, he flees to this Philistine territory, tries to go in and be a mercenary for them. They recognize him. David's, his reputation precedes him, and they know exactly who he is, that he has killed 10,000 of Philistines, right? And so they're like, yeah, we know exactly who this guy is. And so David is in trouble, and he acts crazy to get out of it. He pretends to be insane, scratching on doors and letting drool run down his beard. Kind of a crazy way to get out of being in trouble. Kids, you guys could try that sometime. If just act a little nuts. My son does. They drool and they scratch on doors. I'm telling you. So he gets out of it. They buy it and they let him go. Okay, so now he's on the run again, and he's got to go to a different town. So he flees, he leaves to the cave in chapter 22. It says, so David leaves Gath and he escapes to the cave of Adullam. Adullam actually means refuge. Soon his brothers and all his other relatives join him there. They are not safe in Israel either, so now they are all displaced because of Saul's rage and his anger and his jealousy, and so they got to leave. And then others began coming, men who were in trouble or in debt or who were just discontented, until David was the captain of about 400 men. So this is a ragtag, like ruddy bunch of guys. This is a rough bunch. So these are all people that are discontented in life. They're not happy with their current situation. They're in debt. They're in trouble. Something's going on, and they flee to David. I think it's just kind of a cool parallel with what Jesus has done with me and so many others, that, you know, he takes somebody that's broken and hurting and not happy with life and turns them into something effective and useful and powerful and all these things. And so it's just kind of a cool picture of the church, that David takes these broken men and turns them into fighting warriors. He gives them purpose, he gives them authority, and he's got these 400 men, and he starts to lead them. He sees value in them. That's something really that David often, like throughout all this, David sees value in people. Saul finds out David's in Judah, gives his officers an earful in the next bunch of verses there through verse 9. He's mad. He thinks that they're all hiding something from him, and so he's on the chase. Verse 9, it says, then Doeg the Edomite, so nobody's telling Saul where David is, but then Doeg the Edomite, who was standing there, who was there when David got the bread from Ahimelech. Doeg the Edomite, he's standing there with Saul's men. He spoke up, and he says, when I was at Nob, I saw the son of Jesse talking to the priest Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. Ahimelech consulted the Lord for him, and then he gave him some food and the sword of Goliath the Philistine. He rats him out. King Saul immediately sends for Ahimelech and all of his family who served as priests at Nob. And when they arrive, Saul shouts at them, listen to me, you son of Ahitub. What is it, my king? He asks. And so then Saul says, why have you and the son of Jesse conspired against me? Again, me. Saul demanded, why did you give him food and a sword? Sorry for feeding a hungry and defenseless servant of yours. Why have you consulted God for him? Heaven forbid you pray for somebody else. Why have you encouraged him to kill me as he's trying to do this very day? It's a flat out lie. So here's like Saul going on this attack at one of his high priests, one of his priests, right? And Ahimelech says, but sir, is anyone among your servants as faithful as David, your son-in-law? He's one of your most trusted, faithful servants, and he's also part of your family. He's the captain of your bodyguard and a highly honored member of your household. David's the captain of the bodyguards around Saul. He's this highly positioned authority in Saul's house. Why wouldn't Ahimelech do those things? This is certainly not the first time this is certainly not the first time I had consulted God for him. May the king not accuse me and my family in this matter, for I knew nothing at all of any plot against you. One, there is no plot, and two, he's 100% right. He did nothing. He did nothing but he did everything right. Even Jesus affirms that what Ahimelech did was right. You will surely die, Ahimelech, along with your entire family, the king shouted. And he ordered his bodyguards, kill these priests of the Lord, for they are allies with the conspirators of David. They knew he was running away from me, but they didn't tell me. But Saul's men refused to kill the Lord's priests. Saul's men refused a direct order from the king because they knew that was a violation of God. That was going directly against God, and they weren't going to do it. We are called to do the same thing, right? We do not obey anybody or any authority that goes directly contrary to God. That should have been a heads up to David or to Saul, being like, "Oh wow, my guys won't even trust me in this, and they won't kill these priests. They're not taking my orders." Nope, doesn't stop him. Then the king says to Doeg, "You do it, Doeg." So Doeg the Edomite turned on them and killed them that day, 85 priests in all, wearing their priestly garments. Then he went to Nob, the town of the priests, and killed the priests and their families, men, women, children, babies, and all the cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats. David's little lie, Ahimelech's righteousness, him doing the right thing, and Saul's jealousy lead to the slaughter of 85 priests, their entire families, all their animals. Saul didn't even kill all of the people in the towns that God told him to of his enemies. And then he goes and he kills all these people who are loyal to him. Only Abiathar, one of the sons of Ahimelech, escaped and fled to David. And when he told David Saul had killed the priests of the Lord, David exclaimed, "I knew it. When I saw Doeg the Edomite there that day, I knew he was going to tell Saul. I knew he was sure to tell him. And now I have caused the death of all your family. Stay here with me and don't be afraid. I will protect you with my own life for the same person who wants to kill us both." Notice David never says, "Now I've caused the death of your family, but I was hungry, but I needed help." He never justifies his lie. He never justifies this thing that he's caused, this slaughter of all these people. He confesses to it. He owns it. He says, "I've caused it. I can't go back and undo it. So what I can do right now is we're going to move forward. You come with me. I'll protect you." And he does. Jumping ahead a ways, but Abiathar ends up becoming one of David's priests and stays with him until David's death. So then jumping ahead to chapter 24. Chapter 24, verse 1. So David goes on he's still on the run, and there's some stuff that happens in 23, back and forth, just kind of running from Saul. And in chapter 24, Saul returns home from fighting the Philistines, and he finds out that David has gone into the wilderness at En-Gedi. So Saul chose 3,000 elite troops from all of Israel and went to search for David and his men near the rocks of the wild goats. At the place where the road passes some sheepfolds, Saul went into a cave to relieve himself. But as it happened, David and his men were hiding farther back in that very cave. "Now's your opportunity," David's men whispered to him. "Today the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power to do with as you wish." So David crept off forward and cut a piece of the hem of Saul's robe. Okay, so Saul comes back from fighting the Philistines. He takes 3,000 of his elite men. This is like 5 times more than what David has at this point. So he's got 3,000 elite troops with him, and he stops along the way to take a break. What does it mean when Scripture says relieve himself? If you guys could pull up that picture. Such a dumb joke. The jury's out. The caves were a place where they would go to the bathroom, to sleep, or even just to take a rest from the hot day, because it's nice and cool inside it. So like some other versions say that he went in to cover his feet. No idea what that means. But so he goes in and he's going to take a break, whether that's going to the bathroom or something. Either way, regardless, what he does is when he goes in to take this break, to relieve himself, he's going to take off his robe, his sword, his shield, his armor, all this stuff, and he's going to set it off to the side so he can rest, right? Or do his business, whatever it is. So he's completely vulnerable. He's defenseless, and he has no sword with him. In that same cave, little does he know, in the back of it is David's men, and they are fully armored. They are fully kitted up. They are ready to go. And they see him, and they're like, "Holy cow, this is the guy that's been chasing us, and we've got him. What an opportunity." It says that they whispered to him, like, "Certainly this is God's will to put him into your hand. What an opportunity to take care of him right now." Okay? Like we said earlier, David's already been anointed as the future king of Israel, but he doesn't know how that's going to happen. He doesn't know how he's supposed to be the king of Israel, but he knows that it's coming. And so David's faced with a pretty big dilemma right here. Should he or should he not kill Saul? Was this God delivering David into Saul's hand to kill him? Was that how God was going to bring David into the kingship, right? David's men are telling him this. Even though that it would have been a sin to kill him because it would have been in cold blood, it would have been completely justified by his men and the people. Like, they'd forgive him, right, for doing this? If I was there, I probably would have been telling him the same thing. I'm like, this dude has been chasing us out of our home, all around the country, trying to kill us. He's got 3,000 of his men right here. We know that you're going to be the king. Like, this is it, man. Like, this is the opportunity. He just slaughtered an entire village of priests, all their families. He's tried to kill David multiple times. He tried to kill his best friend. He took a wife away from him. Like, what more does David need to justify killing Saul in this? It looks like God delivered him for David to deliver justice to this unjust king and make all those problems go away and David to become the king of Israel. And so David, for at least a moment, it seems like he agrees. He gets up and he goes forward and he goes to his robe and he cuts off a piece of his robe. Okay, this would have been him symbolizing, like, I've had it, I'm rebelling. This would have been dishonoring to cut part of Saul's holy, like his honor robe, his royalty robe, not holy, his royalty. And then he would have kept it as like a souvenir almost. But then in verse 5 it says, but then David's conscience began bothering him because he had cut Saul's robe. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this to my lord the king. I should not attack the Lord's anointed one, for the Lord himself has chosen him. So David restrained his men and did not let them kill Saul. So it seems that after he cuts his robe, he has this change of heart, right? He feels guilty, he feels troubled. He did this like act of disobedience, even though all this stuff that Saul's put his men through, he still never harbors anger. He never is bitter with Saul. Like, I still don't understand it. I'd be so angry. But yet David never harbored all of that in his heart. He still respects the one that God put in authority. And so he restrains his men. And this is a pivotal moment for David. Okay, I think two things that David knew in this situation. David knew, one, that the means by which you accomplish a goal are just as important as the goal you're trying to accomplish. Okay? David has the opportunity to do all those things, kill him, step into his heir to the throne, be the king and everything. But he knows that the means to that end are sinful. He knows it would be breaking God's law, not to mention he's murdering his best friend's dad. He's murdering his wife's father, his father-in-law, and he's killing the king of Israel, which sets a really dangerous precedent that if you kill the king, you get to become the king because David's going to be the future king. And kind of sets it up that David's going to be just murdered someday and somebody else will take his spot. So he knows that the means by which he accomplishes the goal that God has for him, the means by which he does that is just as important as meeting that goal. Number two, he knows that opportunity does not equal permission. It's so easy to confuse our desires and our circumstances with the will of God. David could have easily seen this as God's will for him to kill Saul and take his place, but David knew that God would not give him an opportunity that required him to sin. The Bible is clear that it is not possible for God to tempt us with sin. It is not possible for God to tempt us. James 1:13-16 says, and remember when you're being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me. God never tempts anyone God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. So God never tempts us. The temptation comes from our own desires. So if David was tempted here, it was from his own desire in his heart to become king and to make all of his problems go away. But instead of taking the easy way out, David chooses not to kill Saul, not to bypass the process. He trusts God, that God is working in this somehow. That for some reason, God put Saul in this cave for David's good. He trusts God's timing entirely. And he chooses to remain faithful and suffer whatever consequences come after this decision of letting Saul go. So Saul gets up in verse 7 and 8. It says, Saul gets up and he leaves the cave and had gone on his way. So they let him go a little bit. David comes out and shouted after him, "My lord the king." And when Saul turned around, David bowed low before him. Then he shouted to Saul, "Why do you listen to the people who say I'm trying to harm you? This very day you can see with your own eyes it isn't true, for the Lord placed you at my mercy back in that cave. Some of my men told me to kill you, but I spared you. For I said, I will never harm the king, for he is the Lord's anointed one. Look, my father, at what I have in my hand. It's a piece of the hem of your robe. I cut it off, but I didn't kill you. This proves that I'm not trying to harm you, and I have not sinned against you, and even though you have been hunting for me to kill me. May the Lord judge. May the Lord judge between us. Perhaps the Lord will punish you for what you're doing or what you're trying to do to me, but I will never harm you. As the old proverbs say, from evil people come evil deeds. What's in your heart comes out. So you can be sure that I will never harm you. Who is the king of Israel trying to catch anyways? Should he spend his time chasing the one who is as worthless as a dead dog or a single flea? May the Lord judge which of us is right and punish the guilty one. He is my advocate, and he will rescue me from your power. David puts it all on God. Says, God will rescue me. God will deliver the answer. God will take care of this. I'm not going to do this myself. I trust God entirely for him to work out his plan, no matter what it costs me. Saul responds. He says, when David has finished speaking, Saul called back, "Is that really you, my son David?" And then he begins to cry. And he said, "David, you are a better man than I am, for you have repaid me good for evil. Yes, you have been amazingly kind to me today, for when the Lord put me in a place where you could have been killed, you didn't do it. Who else would let his enemy get away when he had him in his power? May the Lord reward you for this kindness you have shown me today. And now I realize that you are surely going to be king, and the kingdom of Israel will flourish under your rule. Now swear to me by the Lord that when that happens, you will not kill my family and destroy my line of descendants." He was doing so good with that apology, and then he said that and just blew it. It starts off with a great apology. He weeps. He says, "I'm sorry. Surely you're better than I am." And then he goes at the end and he tries to protect himself. And he says, "Swear to me that when the Lord does that, you won't kill my family." Only looking out for himself. Just an aside, an apology is not an apology if it demands something out of the other person, right? You cannot say, "I'm sorry for the way I acted in that situation, but you shouldn't have done this." That's what he's saying here. "I'm sorry that I've been chasing you and trying to kill you, but it's only because you're the threat to the throne," right? So if you get in a fight or an argument or something, don't say, like, "I'm sorry that this happened, but you shouldn't have done that." Just say, "I'm sorry, it was my fault that I did this," and then just shut up about it. So David agrees to Saul's request, and they go their separate ways. So you'd think that this would be the last time that Saul's chased after him. He's already been shown that he could have been killed and that he should stop here. He doesn't. He keeps going. In verses 25 and 26, Saul continues the chase. In chapter 26, almost the exact same scenario happens where David could kill Saul while he's sleeping. And it says that God put a deep sleep over them. So it seems again like God gave him a second opportunity to kill him, and David doesn't because he trusts God's timing. He trusts God's timing no matter what it costs him. He doesn't try to jump the process. And so finally, then in chapter 31, the Philistines attack the Israelites. They got them on the run. They actually slaughter the Israelites. It's a massacre. They kill Saul's 3 sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. And then Saul is wounded by arrows, and then he's ultimately killed. He gets wounded by arrows. He tells his armor bearer, "Please kill me." Armor bearer says no, so Saul falls in his own sword. He takes his own life. And then his armor bearer does the same thing. God delivered justice on his own timeline. He did it in his way at the hands of the Philistines, keeping David free from this sin and the guilt and all the problems that would have came with it. Like, this had to have been brutal for David for 7 years at least. I don't know. I read some commentaries. This is like 14. I don't know, most of them say like 6 to 7 years that David's on the run. It had to have been brutal. He had to leave behind everything he knew. He had to leave behind his homeland. He left behind his friends and his family. He had a wife taken from him. He lost his other wife. He wandered in the wilderness. He hid in caves. He's always looking out for Saul and his spies and all this stuff. He knew that people were killed simply because they helped him and associated with him. They had people telling Saul terrible things about him, like getting Saul worked up and to chase after him again. All the while wondering, what have I done to deserve this? I've been righteous. I've done the right thing. I have served with integrity, and I have had nothing but bad things come out of it. And then he gets these 2 opportunities to take that shortcut and ease the suffering, but he would be committing this terrible sin in the process. Instead of taking that shortcut, David chooses to trust God completely, and he focuses on the Lord and knows that the Lord will always provide. David had no choice but to rely on the Lord and to trust him. Through all of it, God used this process. Sometimes we don't understand God. God is all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful. Like, we will never learn everything there is to know about God. We are finite, mortal creatures. We don't understand the way God works. God has never learned anything. This blew my mind. I told the youth kids here this, we were talking in our theology class. It blew my mind that God has never learned anything he's never learned anything. He's known everything for all time. And somehow in his sovereignty, in his all-knowing, in his wisdom, in his power, he allows David to go on the run for all this time and face all of that. God used it to develop in David the character that he wanted in Israel's king. Okay, and so there's no shortcuts in life. There's no shortcuts in the sanctification process. Most of us will never suffer like David did. Gosh, I hope you don't have to, but most of us will never suffer to the extent that he did. And sometimes I wonder if maybe that's why we're so soft, like why the church is so soft, because it's been so easy for so long. Suffering makes us strong, right? In our jobs, when we suffer, when we work hard, it produces character. In our marriages, when they get hard, you fight through it. You endure. When sports is like the easiest example, the only way to make your body stronger is to break it down. Military, you go into the military, and what's boot camp? It's a suck fest. Like it's hard, right? They make it hurt because that's the only way to make them grow. We also lack the ability to wait. We want everything now. Like the microwave, Steve's talked about before, the microwave changed our ability to wait. Everything is instantaneous. There's no commercials. Now there's a lot more ads than there used to be a couple years ago, but we want everything right now. We don't want to wait for anything. And we don't want to go through the work. When we were working through this process, Steve had an awesome illustration that acclimation is required for survival and success. So if you took somebody, any of us, and you just took us to the top of the mountain, you dropped us off up there, we would die, okay? Your body is not capable of surviving at a high altitude like that, being dropped off, okay? You have to acclimate to it. Okay, it's the same thing like within an airplane. If you go up, you have to have oxygen in the thing and it be pressurized and all that. Al's probably telling me I'm wrong. But if you just dropped one of us off at the top of the mountain, we can't survive. It's actually the process of climbing the mountain that makes you able to sustain yourself at the peak. You have to acclimate on the way up. Okay, your body has to get used to that stress and that pressure and the low oxygen and everything to be able to survive on top of the mountain. God does the same thing in our walk, in our life, in our faith. We have to be stressed. We have to suffer so we can be ready for what God has called us into. So we got to trust the process. Hebrews 12, verse 11. Get there quick. I'll close with this. So Hebrews 12, verse 11, it says, "No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way." None of us want to suffer. None of us enjoy when we suffer or go through pain, right? But it's the reward after the suffering. How do we endure the suffering? Jesus was the example. It says earlier there in Hebrews, it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. Let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. That's what David did. He ran with endurance the race that God set before him. And we do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion, who initiates and perfects our faith. Keep your eyes on Jesus. It's this idea that I'm so focused on Jesus that I don't care about anybody else. I don't care what anybody else says. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I don't care what anybody else does. I'm so focused on loving Jesus and knowing what he wants for my life that that's all that matters. That's what David did. He kept his eyes focused on God, and he said, I don't care what my men say. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I don't care what I got to go through. I'm going to focus on God, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to be true to him. And God showed up again and again and again and again. So sanctification is a process that takes time. It's going to be painful. Sometimes it's going to suck, okay? But allow God to use you. Allow God to make you suffer to be who you need to be. And not be who you need to be for you. To be who you need to be for other people. Live sacrificially that way. Be imitators of God as his dearly loved children. So with that, we'll go into our response time here. And so there's going to be communion available on both sides. We have prayer leaders available. And so I'm going to pray, and then we can go to that. So let's pray. God, we love you. We know that persecution and tough times and pain and suffering and all these things, you use those to develop us, Lord. I don't understand the ways you do things. I don't understand why you do things like you do, but I trust you. I know that your thoughts are higher than my thoughts. Your ways are higher than our ways. You are so far beyond us. And that gives me great comfort knowing that you're in control in all the little details, just like we saw in David's life. All the little details, all the ways that you looked out for him and provided a way out and didn't tempt him beyond what he could bear. That he didn't trade his inheritance for a moment of pleasure. Help us to be that people, Lord. Make us who we need to be for your kingdom and for other people. We trust you. We love you. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
The head that once was crowned with thorns is crowned with glory now. The Savior knelt to wash our feet. Now at his feet we bow. The one who wore our sin and shame, now robed in majesty, the radiance of perfect love now shines for all to see. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ. Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. The fear that held us now gives way to Him who is our peace. His final breath upon the cross is now alive in me. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. And by your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. Is resurrecting me. The tomb where soldiers watched in vain was borrowed for 3 days. His body there would not remain. Our God has robbed the grave. Our God has robbed the grave. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. It is a foundation.
I know that the Bible talks that, there is no promise of an easy life, right? This is how God develops character in us. This is how God uses us and works in us and everything. And so we're called to be part of that, right? That's why we're called to pick up our cross daily and follow him. It's not pick up everything that's happy and joyful and perfect in the world and follow him. It's pick up your cross. You will suffer. I don't know how that is, but instead of just letting it beat you down, look at it as an opportunity for God to develop something in you that he's going to use to call people to Jesus, right? So as you go out this week, think about that in whatever ways you're suffering, struggling, or how you should be suffering or struggling for the gospel. And so work on that and talk to God, see what he wants to do with your life. So if you will, go ahead and stand, and I'd like to bless you. I pray that you go now knowing the love of God the Father, the grace and mercy of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the fellowship and the power of the Holy Spirit. God bless you all. Have a great week.